This is Frank Westerlund. This is Gary Thompson.
This is Robert Ryderson.
This is Don Atkinson.
This is Steve Kirchner, Judy Ziegler, and Hunter Jameson.
This is the Pioneer Radio Log of Lewis and Clark College.
Passing by the landless waters, bowing o'er its blue, rises our dear alma mater, proudly to the view.
Pioneers returned to Palatine Hill last week from their homes and families as far away as Hawaii and New York to begin another term of academics. The first 3 days were set aside as Reading Week, and the activities commenced under the general theme, Contemporary Threats to Individualism. Profiting from experience gained in the Fall Reading Week program, the events were condensed and varied so that students could have the opportunity to explore the works from various angles. Eric Hofer, a longshoreman, miner, worker, and author of The True Believer, was our principal speaker. In his own words, all he is doing in his book is presenting ideas. Self-educated, Mr. Hofer soon became adapted to his college audience. In a statement for our microphone, Mr. Hofer had some very high praise for Lewis and Clark and some advice, too.
First of all, it's a beautiful setting. You know, all I know about America, I haven't stuck my nose outside the waterfront for so long that all I know about America is the dark there, and I have a good opinion about America. Now I come here, and I see another side of America, and it looks mighty good, you know, the buildings and the people. I had hardly any contact with young people. All I know, and I'm a member of a union of old men, a company of old men. All we know about the juveniles is what we read in the paper, and they tell us they're juvenile delinquents, they're burning things, they're murdering people, and so on. And here I saw a beautiful tribe, and a joy to look at, and intelligent too, and good heavens, I mean, a country with such a young generation is tremendous. The only thing I told President Howard, though, is that he must take care of the boys. The boys are going to run this country. The girls ain't going to run it, no matter what they think. And there should be more boys than girls here.
And with that advice, Eric Hofer returned to the waterfront and the life he loves. He left us enriched with his warmth of ideas and sincerity. Our other guest was Professor George Bluestone of the University of Washington, who brought his film Bartleby the Scrivener. Bartleby is the screen adaptation of the short story by Herman Melville. Professor Bluestone added the intellectual touch to the discussions with Eric Hofer and members of the Lewis and Clark faculty. Everyone had read The Lonely Crowd by David Reisman also, and the theme of individualism was well covered through panels, group discussions, lectures, and conversations. I'll be back with more news about Lewis and Clark after this message.
This is the sound of Paris in the spring. And that was the symptom of a civilized nation in trouble. A plastic bomb exploding in a noisy eruption of terrorism. There are trouble spots all over the world. And like the ones in France this past year, they make news, which is why you'll find correspondents for the New York Times Western edition on the scene. They bring you the sounds, the words, the feelings of nations and people with problems to solve. Problems that may very well affect your life. 50 foreign correspondents report to you each day in the Western edition. News, interviews, background, analysis in depth. The authoritative view you'll find only in the New York Times Western edition. It's an unusual newspaper.
Theta Chi Fraternity hosted its 6th annual pajama dance last Friday night. And speaking of fraternities, men were invited to sign up for rush activities last week. There are 2 national and 2 local fraternities on campus. Rush activities will be held all this week, and preferences begin after that. Our next 2 programs on the Lewis and Clark College Log will discuss the place of the fraternities on the college campus. In sports, the Pioneer basketball squad took all 3 games of their home stand last weekend. 1 game is on tap for the team at home this weekend. On Saturday night, Lewis and Clark will tangle with Willamette. Blonde sophomore Judy Hyde was chosen to represent Lewis and Clark in the annual Winter Carnival in Bend, Oregon on February 22nd. Religion in Life Week speaker will be Theodore H. Gill, president of San Anselmo Theological Seminary. Reverend Gill will speak at Convocation Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. in Evans Auditorium. Classes actually began last Thursday, And after this period of readjustment, things are becoming normal as everyone returns to the routine of learning, which is the purpose of coming to college. The Pioneer Radio Log is produced by the Speech Arts Department of Lewis and Clark College. This is Al Thomas speaking.
Mr. Cronkite, do you think that college radio is a good background for entering into network news, and what advice would you give to people interested in going into news?
Well, I'd first of all suggest that anybody going into news has to have a broad educational background, good liberal arts background with a smattering of science, at least. The more science, the better. But certainly history, economics, philosophy. A little English helps sometimes. Foreign languages, obviously, would be a considerable help. Any experience one gets in radio or in television is valuable experience. Every bit of exposure to the microphone is good. Therefore, as much work as one can do in college radio is to the good.
Shifting the emphasis just a little bit, you were in Paris recently, and from your stay there, how much of an effect do you think that the present unrest, the student unrest and the strikes, are going to have on the Paris peace talks?
I shouldn't think that they would have very much effect on the Paris peace talks. There's so many other more directly related items that have effect on the peace talks that the atmosphere around Paris itself is probably pretty far down the list.
A group of 175 Cuban refugees arrived in Miami to start the second year of the Cuban Airlift. Thus far, the lift has flown close to 44,500 refugees to the U.S. and is scheduled to bring in a similar number this year. The NAACP was back in federal court in Alabama today after submitting hasty answers to 85 questions it previously refused to answer. The refusal netted the group an overnight contempt of court charge. The NAACP and Justice Department are challenging an Alabama state law which voids federal desegregation guidelines. Barry Goldwater's Free Society Association predicts that President Johnson will turn more towards the right as a result of the recent elections. The association's monthly newsletter said American politics tends to stay right around the middle and had swung too far to the left after the 1964 elections when Goldwater was defeated. Soviet officials have accepted bail money for American Craddock Gilmore, held in Leningrad jail on charges of currency violations. Gilmore's traveling companion, Ray Buell Worthen, however, was refused bail because of the more serious nature of the charge against him. Worthen allegedly stole a small bronze bear from a Leningrad hotel lobby. In Washington, the State Department said it is trying to arrange bond for Worthen. Space officials told Congress today they could not even begin to spell out post-Apollo plans until they know the space program's fate in President Johnson's fiscal 1968 Committee for Economic Development said reduced federal spending should be the first goal in creating the surplus, but should be followed by a one-year tax increase. The Grand Champion Holstein at the International Livestock Exhibition in Chicago is called Mickey Mouse. Her owner, Edward Boehm, a Washington's Crossing, New Jersey sculptor who farms on the side, says the horse got the name because her white face and little black ears make her look like Mickey Mouse. At Harbor Beach, Michigan, Coast Guard ships and helicopters continued to search at the site where the ore freighter Daniel J. Morrell went down Tuesday. By mid-afternoon, 20 bodies had been taken from Lake Huron, and 8 other persons were missing and presumed dead. Only 1 man survived the disaster. In Pittsburgh, the surviving Aronson quintuplet went into a convulsion and suffered almost certain brain damage. Budget. Prime Minister Harold Wilson of Britain is aboard the HMS Tiger in the Mediterranean for talks with Rhodesian Premier Ian Smith. Wilson hopes to avoid a final break between the two countries. Jordan troops battled 2 groups of Syrian saboteurs last night. 1 man was injured and 3 others. So they support the Moscow-backed Communist World Summit on the China problem. North Korea also deplored the split in communist ideology, but didn't say she was for or against the summit.
Here's something for long-time enthusiasts. It's the Robert 1650 tape recorder that's packed with the kind of professional features you expect only in more expensive models. The 3-speed Robert 1630 is yours for just $229.95, including 4-track stereo and monaural record and playback, plus 2 professional quality mics. Listen to the exciting new Roberts tape recorder, model 1630 at Wisefield Jewelers, your diamond and watch headquarters, 530 Southwest Washington.
Did you hear that little kid crying? Yeah. Okay, well, that's nice down.
KLC News, Robert Reinerson reporting. South Vietnam's ousted First Corps commander, Major General T, reportedly has taken steps to end student and military demonstrations calling for his return. Informed sources say T made a secret flight from Saigon to Da Nang last night to urge an end to the demonstrations. He was said to fear they would lead to an undoing of his anti-communist works. A general work stoppage called by students and soldiers in Da Nang today ended abruptly at midday. President Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, and former Vice President Nixon all got together over coffee in the First Family's White House bedroom this morning for an informal discussion on international matters. News Secretary Moyers said Nixon reported on a recent overseas trip that included a visit to London. And in London, 2 public opinion polls show Prime Minister Harold Wilson's Labour Party headed for a landslide victory in the March 31st British general election. One poll gave Wilson's party a lead of more than 10% over the Conservative Party, and the other indicated an 8% advantage. If Labour's predicted lead holds up, it could give Wilson a majority of between 75 and 160 seats in the 630-member House of Commons. A Chicago man under treatment as a mental patient was found at the scene of a small fire in a Southside hospital late last night. Police said today the man, James Sirocco, admitted setting fires in 2 other Chicago hospitals in the past 2 years. Sirocco also allegedly admitted setting fires in 3 Northside synagogues. He was apprehended last night by a hospital security guard as he watched a small blaze in a pile of paper and rags. A can of ether lay nearby. The guard and other hospital employees quickly extinguished the fire.
It's hard to determine as far as exactly what caused him to take this action. Mental depression, I guess, covers it just about as much as anything. And we found out that his sister, he has no parents. His parents are dead. And his sister, the one who he was closest to, was critically ill in the hospital in Denmark. And this may have had something to do with his own feeling of depression. And he was not doing well academically. So I think it's probably just a series of things which just cause him to be depressed beyond the point of facing it all.
At least 7 persons were injured early this morning when 47 cars of the Southern Pacific freight train derailed near the Los Angeles suburb of Chatsworth. The train hit a dislodged rail. Police said the rail was broken loose seconds before the wreck when a car hurled through a barricade at the end of a dead-end street, struck the tracks, and plunged over an embankment on the other side. They said freight cars were strewn all over the area, many of them cracked open like peanuts. The driver of the car was the most seriously injured victim. Police have fired on rioting mobs in Amritsar in northwest India, where Hindus have been demonstrating for 3 consecutive days. First reports said 5 persons were wounded. The demonstrators have been protesting a government plan to establish a Punjabi-speaking state. This has been KLC News. Robert Reinerson reporting.
This is Election 66 through the facilities of College Radio. The polls closed at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in California, and early returns are coming in. CBS has just given Ronald Reagan the nod as Republican governor by a margin of 68% to 32% of the vote on the basis of fractional returns. No figures or projections are available in other races. Election interest has been high, and indications are that up to 80% of California's 8 1/3 million registered voters did vote today. Fair weather in the northern half of the state proved an encouragement. In parts of Southern California, the remnants of last weekend's flooding may have kept some voters from the polls. Interest, of course, centered on the gubernatorial contest between Democratic Governor Edmund G. Brown, the 61-year-old incumbent who is bidding today for a 3rd term, and Republican candidate Ronald Reagan, 55, an actor seeking public office for the first time. The white backlash in the wake of rioting in Watts in San Francisco and student unrest at Berkeley had been cited as important issues in the campaign, but in recent days the Brown forces tried to emphasize the issue of experience versus inexperience in public office. Public opinion polls indicated that Reagan was the front runner, but many observers predicted that Brown's vigorous campaigning in the last few days before the election might have closed the gap. Statewide, the Democrats still hold a 3-2 voter registration edge over the GOP, although Republicans made substantial gains in late registration. Another contested office in California is the lieutenant governorship, in which two-term incumbent Democrat Glenn Anderson opposes Republican Robert Finch, former campaign manager for Richard Nixon in 1960. The lieutenant governor serves on the governor's cabinet and several agencies, including the Board of Regents of the University of California. In other races, Republican Frank M. Jordan is seeking a 7th term as Secretary of State, opposed by Democrat Norbert Schley, formerly of the Justice Department. Democrat Alan Cranston is running for a 3rd term as State Controller, opposed by Republican State Assemblyman Houston Flournoy. 16 statewide propositions are also on the ballot. Among the more controversial are an amendment that would revise and simplify the state constitution, a proposal that would allow owners of farm or timberland in metropolitan areas a tax assessment break to conserve open space, and an initiative that would seek to plug alleged holes in state obscenity laws by removing the reference to redeeming social importance in defining obscenity. This is Frank Westerlund reporting.
This is Gary Thompson. I'm down at Tom McCall's headquarters here. He has a party going and is apparently winning the governorship of Oregon. I just had an interview with Bob Elliott. This is his campaign manager. And he is also running for office as representative for the East Central Sub-District, which is the Laurelhurst area. I asked him several questions, and I asked him how he felt the race was going and whether it was going according to plan, and he felt it was. He also stated that he felt the House of Representatives was very important to control because you get many of your good candidates from the House. He also said that this was going to be a good year for the Republicans and that the power for the presidency came from the grassroots level. He said that the state houses were very important. They produced possible presidential candidates. The McCall family was entering into this campaign, and he said that they were. He meant by this that Tom McCall's brother and sister had entered in, and I guess also his mother, and his wife, and he has 2 sons, and they all got very enthusiastic in this campaign. I was very curious about what he felt about the Hatfield race, and it's going well too, and he is winning, and I guess there was speculation this last week whether he would win because of his stand. I asked him some of the reasons he felt that he was winning, and he said that Hatfield was a good campaigner. He also said his previous campaigns for governor had taken him throughout the state, and that he had campaigned statewide before, and that he cited as an example that hitting us one town maybe 8 times where Duncan had a chance maybe to hit it once. He felt that Hatfield had done more for the economy, and people felt that he would do more for the economy. And being the mills that were out downstate, a lot of this was blamed on the administration in Duncan's area, and they felt Hatfield would do the way he has pushed for Oregon's economy, would do more for them. They also felt he was a good campaigner, and Duncan was identified with the tight money policy a great deal, they feel. That's about all down here from Tom McCall's headquarters. This is Gary Thompson for KLC signing off.
Downtown Portland. This is the scene of considerable action now awaiting the governor and his stable. We'll try and get the possibility here. There's a noise down. Oh, the new machine, I would feel you'd get some of an indication within an hour after the polls were closed. And the reason I feel that is that by that time he should be getting over into one of your afternoon votes. And of course you have to decide what percentage and so forth, and you'd have to balance it out, but I think it should give some indication within an hour. Now this is Multnomah County. Of course on the total overall, you have to get your upstate or downstate, whichever you say, that one has to come in. Is NBC going to take the results from our machines and put them to their EVA? Well, ABC is working it here. I see in this particular headquarters, but your national network, I looked up set up to the news press. I see. Thank you very much. Mr. Don Chapman. Chapman, thank you very much. That was Mr. Don Chapman of Hatfield headquarters in downtown Portland. We will now return you to KLC Studios.
An afternoon press conference in Portland's Hilton Hotel. Most of the questioning there dealt with Vietnam. McNamara's leave-taking will have no effect on the war's conduct, Nixon said. There could be a long-range change in the McNamara theory that the U.S. can accept nuclear parity with the Russians. Nixon agreed with Tom McCall's view that primaries would be decisive in the ex-vice president's future. If I become a candidate, I don't intend to lose, he said. We've had too many spoilers in the Republican Party. Whoever wins the Oregon primary will be the odds-on to win favorite in the convention at Miami. His key word on the domestic scene, oft repeated, was orchestration. The problems of the cities can only be solved by an orchestration of federal, state, and private enterprise. Reporters' pencils stroked in unison as Nixon announced that he will announce his decision on whether to run for the presidency in late January. After prodding about his role as a non-candidate, he jokingly replied that, "I'm not just here to smell the roses." This reporter and others noticed that Nixon was in a relaxed but confident mood, fielding questions easily. Unlike many politicians, Nixon arrived at the press conference on time. This is Robert Reinerson reporting for KLC Radio. The parade of national political figures through Portland continued as John Lindsay, the dynamic young mayor of New York City, began a brief series of public appearances in Oregon today. He told KLC that he doesn't plan to meet with Michigan Governor George Romney, who is also visiting Oregon this week. "I'm concerned about the polarization of opinion in this country," the mayor told reporters in a morning press conference. The mayor said that this polarization was one result of the Vietnam War. He described his role in New York's rugged city politics as an effort to bring potential primary states such as Oregon. He termed Rockefeller an excellent candidate for president, but declined to name a candidate he would personally support. Rockefeller has denied he is a candidate for the presidency. Lindsay and his wife add they plan to ski tomorrow afternoon or Saturday at Bachelor Butte. Mrs. Lindsay said her husband is an advanced skier but doesn't race since he got older and wiser. Mrs. Lindsay served coffee and rolls for the reporters at the informal conference. This is Robert Reinerson reporting for KLC News. Michigan Governor and Republican presidential candidate George Romney is in Oregon today and running hard. Len Forsgren, his Oregon campaign manager, told KLC, "This guy is hard to keep up with." Romney moved quickly through a crowd of some 500 business and professional men to the platform of the Portland City Club. The club president, in introducing Romney, noted the number of Democrats in the civic organization and commented on the number of, quote, window shoppers and sightseers, unquote, in the Benson Hotel's Mayfair room. The skeptical audience may not have been converted, but Romney did receive a standing ovation at the close of his 45-minute speech. With his face perspiring from the glare of television lights in the dining room, Romney charged that our military establishment has generated a momentum of its own. Noting the disparate elements in American society, he said that we must do a better job of orchestrating our military and political powers. Once again, he pushed his proposal for guaranteed neutralization. Two key points emerged from the speech, for this reporter anyway. First, Romney is trying to sell himself as the only man with a positive proposal on Vietnam. He apparently believes this sincerely, as the City Club has a long record of skeptical receptions for political figures. Its membership is highly educated. Therefore, the choice of topics shows Romney wants to sell opinion leaders on his plan. Secondly, no matter which candidate wins the Oregon primary, Lyndon Johnson is going to hear the word orchestration many times. This reporter noticed Richard Nixon's use of the word twice in his last press conference here. Today, Romney used the word. It looks like a common Republican Party line may emerge from the heat of the primaries. This is Robert Reinerson for KLC News. A place in the news today. Overhead, there was a rusty sign that read, income tax. Behind, there was a decaying frame house. Garbage was heaped behind it. On the street, there was a wind-whipped handful of citizens waiting. It was the Albina District's chance to see Bobby Kennedy, appearing there to open his campaign headquarters in a converted storefront. Posters in the window told passers-by that we have a campaign, a phrase reminiscent of Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech. Kennedy arrived half an hour late. By that time, the growing collection of people had been joined by 3 anti-pickets. One sign read, RFK spells ratfink. A matronly lady kept muttering, isn't that the limit, isn't that the limit? When Bobby stepped from his new powder blue Ford station wagon, the traditional screaming rush toward the New Yorker took place. Bobby said a few words and then fought his way back to his car. The New York reporters piled into their bus and headed downtown behind him. All in all, the visit was extremely ordinary. Kennedy came down to Albina. The people there, mixed with a heavy dose of local Democratic wheels, proved that they liked Bobby. Bobby tried to show that he liked them in a total out-of-car into-car time of 12 minutes. In a few minutes, the sidewalk was again gray and empty. The garbage was still waiting in back. The building was still slowly deteriorating. A little Albina resident toddled home wearing an outsized red, white, and blue plastic cap with a Kennedy sticker on it. Newsday today. This is Robert Reinerson reporting.
Senator Robert Kennedy, Democratic candidate for the presidential nomination, arrived in downtown Portland at the corner of 6th and Morrison at 12:35 today, half an hour after the arrival time was published. Crowds filled the street. Over 1,000 people are here. No traffic is moving on 6th or on Yamhill Street. Police said that Kennedy's group had no parade permit to block the streets, so the police tried to keep traffic moving through. However, this attempt failed when the senator appeared. There's a policeman blowing his whistle in the center of the street, waving his arms frantically, but no one is paying attention. All eyes are on Bobby, including the eyes of a whole string of press and TV people following along in the senator's wake. The senator is going to mount the rear of a converted flatbed truck where a band and speaking platform have been set up. The band has been entertaining the crowd for half an hour. A big reception for Bobby in downtown Portland. This is Robert Reinerson for OCBS News.
Mr. Green, I'm delighted to be here. Delighted to see all of you, and I want to express my appreciation to all of you for coming down so early in the morning and Saturday morning to greet all of us. I wanted to come to Oregon City because I'm anxious to present my campaign all across the state of Oregon. You're one of the few states in which the people themselves actually make the choice. In most parts of the United States, the political leaders indeed, they decide who's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. But here in the state of Oregon, the people themselves decide.
We're on board the Robert F. Kennedy Beaver State Special, heading south out of Oregon City now towards Salem. You can hear the engine winding up. We're riding right behind it in the first coach with a crowd of Kennedy girls dressed in their bright uniforms. They've been out at each stop to pass out literature. Also on board here to make the press feel right at home. Home was never quite like this. We're passing right through the publisher's paper mill now. The strange smell of paper odor wafting through the train out past the Oregon City Falls. About 100 people stood in the Oregon City freight station. They listened to Kennedy speak for about 15 minutes. The major point of his speech, brand new, was a plea to have a woman representative at the Paris Peace Conference. This is Robert Reinerson on board the Beaver State Special, now back to KLC.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention? On behalf of the citizens...
Representative Edith Green out on the platform with Bobby Kennedy.
Would like to introduce Congresswoman Edith Green, who will introduce Senator Robert Kennedy.
Thank you very much. May I tell you first of all that Salem is the place where I grew up. I lived in Salem most of my life. I attended school here. I taught school. So I'm delighted as a former Salemer to have Senator Robert F. Kennedy come back to the city that I knew for so many years. May I say, 10 days from today, you people vote that you cast one of the most important votes that you will ever cast.
Let them sign
I'm in this primary election for one reason. And this is because of my deep concern about what's happening in this country. I'm in this election because of my deep concern about Vietnam, about our inversion of national priorities, and that I think is going to be the next president of the United States, Senator Robert Kennedy.
Well, I'm delighted to be back in Salem. I'm delighted to see all of you, and I'm very, very pleased that Mrs. Green would accompany me. We had a great trip here to Salem last time. I had such a good time and pronounced all the words exactly properly. I hear all my supporters have had a very, very difficult time. Willamette. I've been studying it. You know, before I arrived last time, I studied it in the car to make sure that I got it absolutely properly.
and then I blew it. But I'm very, very pleased to be here. This old town and community with a long, long history of which all of you are terribly proud, the oldest.
But I love by the people in the local community, bringing the private sector in an active way, changing the philosophy of government and starting to move ahead, constructing housing and making jobs for our citizens. I think that's what makes much more sense than what we're doing at the present time, and that's what I expect to do if I'm elected President of the United States with your help. I'll return the presidency and the control of government, not to some remote area 3,000 miles away, but to you yourselves. And I'm going to work with you, and I'm going to make an effort with you, and use the talent and the courage and the knowledge of the American people. That doesn't rest just in Washington. It rests in communities such as Salem, and it rests across the state of Oregon. This great, great state. It rests in here, and it rests around the rest of the United States. And that's where our strength was laid in the past, and where it lies now, and I intend to return government to the control of the people of Sarah. George Bernard Shaw once wrote, some people see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? I think that's what guides the people across the state of Oregon, and that's what will guide me in this campaign over the period of the next 10 days, as I ask your support. Thank you very, very much.
They blow just 2 minutes before the train leaves, and that's the reason that everyone scrambles when the whistle finally blows. Once again, kids squirming up against the rear platform to try to get one last look at Bobby, one handshake. The railroad men coming up here now, pile on the train. There's the final signal. Conductor's throwing the steps up. Here we go. Stream of people moving away from the station, half of them running for their cars, the other half running along beside the train. And whoops, there's a Kennedy girl, almost didn't make it. There's another one running too. It's going to be hit or miss. We're slowing down so that the girls can catch up. They're still running to catch on the train. We may lose some Kennedy girls in Albany. Here we go. They got them. Workmen along the trackside put down their tools to wave at the special that goes through. Yeah, the sign that's at the front of the depot here is blocked off so many people you can barely see it. Charter buses lined up to carry press people into Eugene. The U of O is about a mile away from the railroad depot, a little bit too far to walk. Kids up on sides of buildings, on top of boxcars. Once again, a band playing Eugene. He's out on the platform now. On the platform, the supporters cheering, space well tanned, a little bit perspiring. It's quite warm and muggy here in Eugene. The sky overcast, just a slight tinge of smog in the air, although they don't admit that they have it in Eugene. They're trying to load the Kennedy girls into the car so that they can be up at the U of O to greet the senator. They're going to use the Kennedy girls as a flying wedge to help Senator Kennedy get into the car. It's a new use for the uniformed girls. The senator saying a few words to the crowd about how happy he is to be here in Eugene, the head of the Willamette Valley. A few light remarks. The Kennedy girls are formed up now in a gauntlet so that the senator can run between them to get into the car without being caught by the large crowd. A crowd of Reagan supporters once again around the end of the private car. Reagan signs blocking off the Kennedy signs. Bobby's telling one of his Reagan jokes again that we heard in Albany. Kennedy's finished his speech, and the Kennedy girls swinging into song. The crowd moving around, jostling, hands upreached, trying to shake Robert Kennedy's hand. They're opening the gates to the rear platform. He's stepping down. He's a little bit hesitant to step down into that mob of people plastered against the sides of the car. Railroad guards moving up to try and pull him through. Motor motorcycles, the police escort, gunning up.
Senator Kennedy, his wife, and close aides are awaiting the results of the election in a private room at the Benson Hotel, where his organization has reserved a ballroom for a quote-unquote victory celebration. McCarthy, who is staying at Portland's Congress Hotel, is expected to make an early appearance at his main campaign headquarters in downtown Portland. On the Republican side, the question is, how large will Richard Nixon's victory be? The former vice president has campaigned freely, his two supposed opponents, California Governor Ronald Reagan and New York Governor Rockefeller, absent, or counting on a number of devoted campaign workers to drum up support. At last report, the Rockefeller organization was working feverishly on the phones, trying to sway the large number of uncommitted voters in the state to write in Rockefeller. They were still at it when the polls closed some 30 minutes ago. Nixon, whose victory is nearly assured, will wait until enough votes are in and then proceed to a victory celebration at the Benson Hotel, right below Senator Kennedy's ballroom. Here in Oregon, there are several races of major interest. Heading the list is the race for the Democratic Senate seat held by Wayne Morse. He is being challenged by Bob Dunkman. On the Republican side, the top race is for the Secretary of State nomination, where incumbent Clay Myers faces a tough challenge from House Speaker F.F. Montgomery. For the Democratic Secretary of State race, George Van Humison, former Multnomah County District Attorney, faces Cap Yegi of LeGrand. Seeking the Republican senatorial nomination are Robert Packwood and John Boyd. Here in Portland, OCBS reporters are situated at key campaign headquarters for both the national and state races. During the night, we will have reports from Don Leap and John Slater covering the Nixon and Kennedy headquarters at the Benson Hotel, George Cowan at Reagan headquarters, Brad Grove at McCarthy headquarters, Robbie Robinson covering Rockefeller headquarters, and Barbara Lee covering the major state races. In first reports from the election, Senator Eugene J. McCarthy swept into an early lead over Senator Robert Kennedy tonight in early returns from the Oregon primary. Report on the race for Secretary of State. Here are the comments of Multnomah County District Attorney George Van Humison.
The president at 84% of the vote, and his probable Republican opponent will be Clay Myers. The president, he thinks that Senator Morse will remain the incumbent, and is surprised at McCarthy's lead. He's also certain that Nixon is now the only real contender for the Republican nomination for president. Those are Van Humison's opinions on the race now, and this is Don Atkinson reporting for OCBS News.
This has been a report from downtown Portland. Don Atkinson for OCBS with the George Van Humison headquarters. This is the Oregon Collegiate Broadcast System.
This is OCBS, Election Central, Eugene. This is Steve Kirchner, Judy Ziegler, and Senator Jameson back in Eugene with more details on tonight's Oregon primary. We have a late report tonight from the Eugene, or rather Lane County Courthouse, and let's switch to Tom Ballantyne and Al Mandelberg down at the courthouse.
This is Tom Ballantyne down at the Lane County Courthouse. We're collating our results here from the 9:55 p.m. press report, with 73 precincts reporting.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Al. Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota's dealt the presidential ambitions of Robert F. Kennedy a stunning blow in the Oregon primary tonight. McCarthy defeated the New York senator in the Democratic presidential race, ending 2 defeats at the hands of Kennedy in Indiana and Nebraska. It is the first election loss ever for Kennedy and may prove fatal to his efforts to win the nomination at the National Convention in Chicago. President Johnson collected 13% of the vote with 1,122 precincts reported, and Vice President Hubert Humphrey 7%. Richard M. Nixon has captured the Republican nomination with better than 70% of the vote. Governor Ronald Reagan of California is taking 22% of the vote with 30% of the precincts reporting. And Governor Nelson Rockefeller of a write-in has a disappointing 6%. In the U.S. Senate race tonight, incumbent Wayne Morse has moved into the lead with 1 percentage point. And that's the news, or the results, rather, from Eugene.
This is the Oregon Collegiate Broadcasting System.
Here's a special report from Dave Gerlitz.
Dave Gerlitz for OCBS News. Engaging student reaction to the outcome of tonight's Oregon presidential preference primary, the overall feeling seems to be one of strong enthusiasm, at least from McCarthy supporters. But there were those who registered a somewhat more cautious response. In considering the political impact of the Minnesota senator's victory, one student remarked, "Unless McCarthy wins a substantial percentage more than Kennedy, I question whether this gives McCarthy a better chance than he ever had." It goes without saying that Kennedy supporters were more than mildly surprised. Dave Gerlitz reporting.
That commentary by Dave Gerlitz. This is Robert Reinerson for OCBS.
This is OCBS, Election Central, Eugene. Okay, again, this is Steve Kirchner, Judy Ziegler, and Hunter Jameson, along with our floor man, Bill Hagerman, who is just about to sit down on the floor. Hunter, let's switch to you.
Well, thank you. We're all about ready to sing through the floor, but some of the races are very close. They haven't changed much since our last report.
Robbie Robinson files this report from McCarthy headquarters in downtown Portland.
This is Warren Robinson. There's dancing in the streets. I mean that literally.
Get the report. Get Bob in here. He has a special report.
Among thousands of people are in the street near the old Elk building at the McCarthy headquarters. About 38 minutes ago, McCarthy stood before a group and thanked him. Thousands of cheering people in a packed upstairs room for the victory here in Oregon. McCarthy thanked the people for the beautiful buttons. He said they're the best buttons they've ever had anywhere, the best signs, and the best people anywhere. McCarthy stood before a crowded room as the people nostalgically sung the Battle Hymn of the Republic. As I was standing by, a message came in that Kennedy had conceded, and all of a sudden thousands of people started cheering. People of all descriptions here. Someone was helping an 80-year-old woman up the steps. In fact, two 80-year-old women up the stairs, as thousands and thousands of people are still here celebrating, eating, laughing, watching the reports, milling around, having a good time. As I said, there's dancing in the street at the McCarthy headquarters.
Martin Luther King's death shook the LC campus more seriously than any event since the assassination of John Kennedy. A crowd of Serious Fate staff members gathered around the KLC teletype as bulletin after bulletin moved across the plain yellow copy paper. In the TV lounge of the Templeton Center, another crowd gathered. The King story was squeezed between the deodorant commercials and other news stories on the network's extended newscasts, but its impact was felt nevertheless. Reached at his home, John R. Howard told KLC that King's death was a great tragedy. He noted the tension-filled situation in Memphis, adding that a lot of people are going to have to use great restraint. Like John Kennedy's assassination, the King tragedy will leave a deeper mark than sorrow. King was a symbol as well as a man. He died because he was a symbol, and while LC students may grieve for the man today, the symbol that was smashed may cause us more sorrow tomorrow. Newsday continues.